The stars had watched Earth for 10,000 years, and the watchers behind those stars had grown impatient with waiting. High Commander Sithara stood at the observation deck of her flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and she gazed upon the blue and green marble floating in the darkness of space. Her crystalline eyes reflected the planet's soft glow, and her four-fingered hands clasped behind her back as she considered what the Valkyrie had created so long ago. Such a small world, she whispered to herself. And yet it has caused us so much trouble already. 10,000 years earlier, the Valkyrie Dominion had sent seed ships across the galaxy. They planted genetic experiments on hundreds of worlds, hoping to cultivate species that would one day serve the Empire as workers and soldiers. Earth had been one of those experiments, and the primitive bipeds they had engineered showed great promise at the time. The Valkyrie had expected to return and find a docile population ready for harvest. They had expected grateful creatures who would bow before their creators and accept their role in the grand empire. What they found instead made Sithra's blood run cold with a mixture of anger and disbelief. The observation drones had sent their reports across the vast emptiness of space, and those reports told a story that no Valkyrie scientist had predicted. The humans had not remained primitive. They had not stayed in their caves and forests, hunting small animals and fearing the night. Instead, they had built cities that stretched toward the sky. They had split the atom and harnessed its terrible power. They had walked upon their own moon and left footprints in its ancient dust. Contaminated, Sithara declared as she turned away from the viewport. The experiment has gone wrong, and we must correct our mistake. Her second-in-command, a tall Valkyrie named Vexenol, approached with a data tablet clutched in his trembling hands. His bioluminescent skin flickered with nervous energy as he presented the latest intelligence to his commander. High Commander, the humans have detected our fleet. They are broadcasting signals in all directions, and their primitive communication networks have erupted with panic and confusion. Sithara allowed herself a thin smile. Let them panic. Let them see what true power looks like. They are nothing but cattle who have forgotten their place, and we shall remind them. 300 warships hung in Earth's orbit like a crown of death. Each vessel bristled with weapons that could level mountains and boil oceans. The Valkyrie had conquered 47 species across 6 spiral arms of the galaxy, and not once had they faced a challenge they could not overcome. This mission would be no different, or so Sithara believed. She gave the order, and every screen on Earth flickered to life with the same message. Televisions and computers and phones all displayed the ultimatum in every human language. The words were simple and absolute. Surrender immediately and report to designated processing zones, or face complete annihilation. There would be no negotiation and no mercy for those who resisted. The Valkyrie expected the humans to fall into chaos. They expected governments to collapse and leaders to flee. They expected the weak creatures to turn on each other in their desperation to survive. This was how every other species had reacted when faced with the might of the Dominion, but the humans did something unexpected. They refused in a bunker deep beneath the mountains of Colorado. The President of the United States watched the alien message play on a cracked screen. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with a fire that had been passed down through generations of human survivors. She picked up a phone that connected her to leaders around the world, and she spoke words that would echo through history. They want us to surrender. They think we will kneel, but we have never kneeled before any enemy, and we will not start now. Tell your people to fight. Tell them that humanity does not go quietly into the night. Similar conversations happened in Moscow and Beijing, in London and Tokyo, in 100 capitals across the globe. Old enemies who had pointed nuclear weapons at each other for decades suddenly found common ground. They shared intelligence and coordinated their defenses. They put aside ancient grudges because they understood that none of their petty conflicts mattered if humanity ceased to exist. Dara watched from orbit as the humans scrambled like insects below. She expected white flags and surrender negotiations within hours. Instead, she received reports that made her crystalline eyes narrow with confusion. Human military forces were not retreating. They were repositioning and fortifying. Underground bunkers that had been built to survive nuclear war were now filling with soldiers and civilians. Factories that had produced cars and appliances were converting to produce weapons. They do not understand their situation, Vexenol observed with genuine bewilderment. Do they not see our fleet hanging above their world? Do they not comprehend that we could burn their entire civilization to ash? Sithara flicked her hand dismissively. They are primitives. They have never faced a superior enemy. Once we demonstrate our power, they will break. She gave the order to begin the pacification strikes. Beams of plasma rained down from the heavens. Washington, D.C. vanished in a pillar of fire. The ancient Forbidden City in Beijing became a crater. Moscow's Red Square melted into glass. The symbols of human power and history were erased in seconds. And then Sithara waited for the surrender that would surely follow. It never came. Instead, something remarkable happened in the smoking ruins of human civilization. The survivors did not weep and beg for mercy. They did not turn on each other in their despair. They looked up at the alien fleet with hatred burning in their hearts. And they made a choice that would change the fate of the galaxy. They chose to fight in the rubble of destroyed cities. Human hands reached for weapons. In underground bunkers, generals drew up battle plans against an enemy from the stars. In laboratories that had survived the bombardment, scientists began studying the wreckage of crashed alien probes with desperate intensity. High Commander Sithara had expected to crush humanity in a matter of days. She had no idea that she had just awakened something ancient and terrible, something that had been forged in the fires of a brutal world and tempered by 10,000 years of endless war. Against itself, she had awakened the fury of humanity, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Valkyrie had perfected the art of conquest over 12,000 years of galactic expansion, and their methods had never failed them before. First, they would demonstrate overwhelming force by destroying the symbols of power that primitive species held dear. Then they would eliminate the central leadership and watch as the remaining population fell into chaos and despair. Finally, they would offer terms of surrender, and the broken creatures would accept servitude as a mercy compared to extinction. This strategy had worked on the insectoid hive queens of Varric 7. It had worked on the peaceful philosophers of the Mindful Collective. It had worked on the warrior clans of Raxus Prime, who had been fierce but ultimately rational enough to recognize defeat. But humanity was different. High Commander Sithara paced the bridge of her flagship as report after report arrived, each one more confusing than the last. Her tactical advisor, a veteran named Kethro, who had overseen the subjugation of 6 species, stood beside her with his bioluminescent skin flickering in patterns that signaled deep distress. I do not understand what I am seeing, Kethral admitted as he studied the holographic display showing Earth's surface. We destroyed their capitals 72 hours ago. Their central governments should have collapsed. Their chain of command should be shattered. Sithara stopped pacing and turned to face him. And yet they have already established new command structures. The surviving human leaders are communicating through hidden networks. They are coordinating their military forces across thousands of kilometers. Kethral's voice carried a note of disbelief. Commander, nations that were pointing weapons at each other just days ago are now sharing intelligence and resources. Old enemies are fighting side by side. This made no sense to the Valkyrie mind. Their species operated through strict hierarchies, and when leadership fell, everything beneath it crumbled. The idea that humans could simply create new leaders and keep fighting was as foreign to them as breathing underwater. But the humans did not care what the Valkyrie thought was possible in the ruins of what had once been New York City. A woman named Colonel Sarah Chun led a ragtag group of soldiers through the rubble. They had salvaged weapons from destroyed military bases and gathered survivors from collapsed buildings. When they spotted a Valkyrie scout ship landing in Central Park, Colonel Chun did not hesitate for even a second. "We hit them hard and we hit them fast," she told her soldiers, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her heart. "They think we are helpless. Let us show them how wrong they are." The Valkyrie scouts never expected an attack. They emerged from their vessel expecting to find cowering survivors ready for processing. Instead, they found bullets and grenades and the fury of humans who had nothing left to lose. The battle lasted only 15 minutes. When it was over, 3 Valkyrie lay dead, and the humans had captured their first alien weapons. Similar scenes played out across the planet. In the forest of Russia, guerrilla fighters ambushed Valkyrie patrols. In the mountains of Afghanistan, warriors who had spent generations fighting invaders turned their skills against a new enemy from the stars. In the jungles of Vietnam, old tunnels that had hidden soldiers decades ago now sheltered a new generation of resistance fighters. High Commander Sithara received the casualty reports with growing disbelief. Hundreds of Valkyrie soldiers were dying every day, killed by a species that should have been on its knees begging for mercy. How is this possible? She demanded of her advisors. "We have superior technology. We have orbital bombardment capability. We have shields and energy weapons and thousands of years of military experience." Kethral swallowed hard before answering. "Commander, the humans are learning. They are studying our weapons and our tactics. Already they have begun to figure out how our pulse rifles work, and they are manufacturing their own versions in underground factories." Impossible. It took the Mindful Collective 300 years to reverse engineer our basic technology. The humans accomplished it in 1 week. Sithara felt something she had never experienced before in her long military career. It was a cold sensation that started in her chest and spread through her entire body. Later, she would learn that humans called this feeling dread. She ordered a ground invasion to crush the resistance once and for all. Thousands of Valkyrie soldiers descended to Earth's surface in dropships, confident that their superior training and equipment would sweep aside any opposition. They expected a quick and decisive victory. They found something else entirely. The humans did not fight the way civilized species fought. They did not form orderly battle lines or follow predictable strategies. They attacked from shadows and sewers and rooftops. They planted explosive devices on roads and rigged buildings to collapse. They used their knowledge of their own world against the invaders in ways that no Valkyrie tactician had anticipated. In the city once called Berlin, Commander Vexenol led an elite unit of 500 soldiers through the empty streets. His troops were the best of the best, each one enhanced with cybernetic implants and equipped with energy shields that could stop any projectile. The humans killed 30 of them in the first hour. They are everywhere and nowhere. Vexenol screamed into his communicator as plasma fire erupted around him. They attack and then vanish. We cannot find them. We cannot corner them. They know every building and every tunnel in this cursed city. The human resistance fighters had turned their own ruins into a maze of death. They struck from unexpected angles and retreated before the Valkyrie could respond. They used the rubble as cover and the darkness as their ally. When Vexenol finally captured one of them, a young man with blood on his face and fire in his eyes, he demanded to know how such primitives were defeating trained soldiers. The human laughed in his face. "You want to know our secret? We have been fighting each other for 10,000 years. We are really good at killing. And now we have finally found something worth killing together. Vexenol did not understand the full meaning of those words until much later, but High Commander Sithara was beginning to grasp the terrible truth that her advisors had failed to see. The humans were not civilized beings who had accidentally developed dangerous technology. They were something far more terrifying. They were predators who had spent their entire existence sharpening their claws on each other. And now those claws were pointed at the Valkyrias. The weeks turned into months. The invasion that should have been over in days became a grinding nightmare. Human resistance grew stronger instead of weaker. Human weapons became more sophisticated. Human tactics became more deadly. And in secret laboratories around the world, human scientists worked day and night to unlock the final secret of Valkyrie technology: the ability to reach the stars. The Valkyrie prided themselves on understanding the species they conquered. They studied their prey before striking, learning their weaknesses and exploiting their fears. But they had never studied humanity, because they had never considered the humans to be a threat worth. Studying this mistake would cost them everything, Commander. Kethril had taken it upon himself to learn about the humans after months of grinding warfare. He spent countless hours reviewing intercepted communications and captured data files. He read about human history and human culture, and what he discovered made his blood turn to ice in his veins. "High Commander, you need to see this," he said one morning as Sithara entered the command center. His voice trembled in a way that Sithara had never heard from the veteran soldier. "What is it now?" Sithara asked with exhaustion heavy in her voice. The invasion had stretched into its 4th month, and the casualty reports grew longer every day. Kethril activated a holographic display that showed images from human history. "I have been studying their past, trying to understand how they fight so effectively. What I found is beyond anything I could have imagined." The first image showed a frozen city surrounded by mountains of snow. This is a place the humans called Stalingrad. During one of their global wars, 2 groups of humans fought over the city for more than 5 months. Nearly 2 million humans died in the battle. 2 million! Sithara stared at the number in disbelief. The entire Valkyrie military numbered only 3 million soldiers. These creatures had killed that many of their own kind in a single battle over a single city. "It gets worse," Kethril continued as new images appeared. "This is a narrow passage called Thermopylae. 300 human warriors held this ground against an army of hundreds of thousands. They knew they would die, but they fought anyway. Every single one of them died rather than surrender. They chose death over retreat? Why would any rational being make such a choice? Because humans are not rational beings, Commander. They are something else entirely." Kethril pulled up more images, each one more horrifying than the last. During their second global war, humans flew aircraft into enemy ships to sink them. They strapped explosives to their bodies and detonated themselves among enemy soldiers. They invented weapons that could poison entire cities and kill millions with a single blast. The display showed a mushroom cloud rising over a ruined city. Sithara had seen nuclear weapons before, but the Valkyrie had abandoned such crude devices thousands of years ago. They were too dangerous and unpredictable. But humans had not only built them, they had actually used them against each other. "And they kept the weapons afterward," Kethril whispered. "Even now, they have enough nuclear devices to destroy their own world many times over. They live with this threat every single day, and they consider it normal." Sithara felt the deck beneath her feet shift as the weight of this information settled upon her shoulders. She had underestimated these creatures so badly. She had assumed they were like every other species the Valkyrie had conquered. But humans were not like any species in the galaxy. The reports from the ground only confirmed Kethril's terrible discoveries. In the Philippine Islands, a Valkyrie pacification unit entered a city called Manila expecting light resistance. What they found was a nightmare beyond comprehension. The humans fought from sewers and basements and collapsed buildings. They attacked at night when Valkyrie vision was weakest. They used knives and clubs when their ammunition ran out, and they kept fighting with their bare hands when their weapons were taken. One human soldier, wounded and bleeding from a dozen cuts, managed to kill 3 Valkyrie before finally falling. "They do not surrender," the unit commander reported before his communications went silent. "They do not retreat. They attack us while smiling. Some of them sing songs as they charge our positions." What kind of creatures are these? In the frozen wastes of Siberia, Valkyrie forces discovered that humans could survive conditions that would kill most galactic species. The temperatures dropped far below freezing, but the human guerrillas continued to fight. They wrapped themselves in animal furs and moved through the snow like ghosts, striking at supply lines and vanishing into the white void. One captured human, a woman with frost in her hair and ice in her eyes, was brought before a Valkyrie interrogator. When asked how she could fight in such horrible conditions, she laughed and spoke words that would haunt the interrogator for the rest of his life. "Horrible? This is nothing. My grandmother survived worse than this during the Great War. She walked 500 kilometers through snow like this while pregnant with my mother. You think a little cold will stop us? You think anything will stop us?" The interrogator had no answer, but the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. Catherall had been studying human biology, trying to find weaknesses that could be exploited. Instead, he found something that challenged everything the Valkyrie believed about intelligent life. "Humans do not truly sleep," he explained to the assembled commanders. "They require rest, but they can function for days without it through sheer willpower. They consume chemicals that stimulate their bodies and minds. One of these chemicals is called caffeine, and humans ingest it constantly. How is that possible? Every known species requires regular dormancy cycles to survive. Humans override their own biology through determination. They call it pushing through. And there is more." Catherall's voice dropped to a horrified whisper. "When humans are injured, their bodies flood with natural chemicals that reduce pain and increase aggression. The more you hurt them, the more dangerous they become. They call this effect adrenaline, and it allows them to perform feats of strength and endurance that should be physically impossible." The commanders sat in stunned silence. They had come to Earth expecting to find cattle waiting for harvest. Instead, they had found monsters. Monsters who had spent 10,000 years fighting and killing and surviving against every horror their brutal world could throw at them. Monsters who had turned their own aggressive nature into an art form. Monsters who did not know how to quit. High Commander Sithara looked at her officers and saw fear written across their faces. For the first time in Valkyrie history, they were facing an enemy that they could not break. Because you cannot break something that refuses to bend. And humanity had never bent for anyone. 6 months had passed since the Valkyrie fleet arrived in Earth's orbit, and High Commander Sithara stood alone in her private quarters staring at the casualty numbers displayed on her personal screen. 60,000 Valkyrie soldiers had died on that small blue world below. 12 warships had been destroyed, not by nuclear weapons or advanced technology, but by humans who flew their own aircraft directly into the hulls. The humans called these pilots kamikazes, a word from an ancient human language that meant divine wind. The Valkyrie had no word for such a concept. The idea that someone would willingly sacrifice their own life to destroy an enemy was completely alien to their way of thinking. But to humans, it was just another tactic in their endless war against anything that threatened their existence. A chime at her door interrupted Sithra's dark thoughts. She straightened her uniform and composed her features before calling for the visitor to enter. Her chief science officer, a female named Veltris, who had spent her career studying alien biology, stepped into the room with a data tablet clutched against her chest. "Hi, Commander. I have completed the analysis you requested. I now understand why the humans evolved to be so aggressive." Veltress' eyes were wide, with a mixture of fascination and horror. "May I show you?" Sithara nodded and gestured toward the display screen. Veltress connected her tablet, and images began to appear. 10,000 years ago, when our ancestors seeded Earth with genetic material, they classified the planet as a Class 4 habitable world. Mild climate, abundant water, diverse ecosystem. A perfect breeding ground for a labor species. Veltress paused to take a breath. They were catastrophically wrong. The screen showed a diagram of Earth's position in its solar system. First, the planet has an extreme axial tilt of 23 degrees. This creates unpredictable seasonal variations that have forced every species on the planet to adapt to rapidly changing conditions. Most civilized worlds have stable climates. Earth's climate is chaotic. Sithara nodded slowly, not yet understanding the full implications. Second, the planet's star bombards it with harmful radiation constantly. Human bodies have evolved to repair cellular damage caused by this radiation, which is why they heal from injuries so quickly. They have been bathed in mutagenic radiation for millions of years. The next image showed Earth's tectonic plates. Third, the planet's crust is unstable. It experiences constant earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Entire cities can be destroyed in minutes. Humans have learned to survive catastrophic disasters as a normal part of existence. Veltress's voice grew more urgent as she continued. Fourth, Earth is home to more deadly species than any other known habitable world. Venomous insects. Apex predators with massive teeth and claws. Microorganisms that constantly attack human bodies from the inside. She pulled up an image of human immune cells fighting a bacterial infection. Their own biology is a battlefield. Every single day, invisible creatures try to kill them, and their bodies fight back automatically. The weight of this information pressed down on Sithara like a physical force. "You are telling me that we seeded our experiment on a death world?" "Yes, High Commander. By any reasonable classification system, Earth should be considered a Class 8 hostile environment. Our ancestors made a terrible mistake 10,000 years ago, and we are paying for it now." Veltress changed the display again, this time showing a comparison between Velkari evolution and human evolution. The Velkari evolved on a gentle world with stable conditions. We became intelligent through cooperation and careful planning. Our greatest survival advantage was our ability to work together in large groups. And the humans? The humans evolved under constant threat from every direction. The weak died young. Only the strongest and most aggressive survived long enough to reproduce. Generation after generation, Earth selected for the most dangerous traits possible. Veltress pulled up an image that made Sithara's blood freeze in her veins. And then they did something that no other species in the galaxy has ever accomplished. The image showed a human sitting beside a large four-legged predator with massive teeth and powerful jaws. The human was smiling, and the creature was resting its head in the human's lap. "They domesticated their predators," Veltress whispered. "This creature is called a dog. Its ancestors were wolves, one of the most efficient pack hunters on Earth. Humans did not hide from these predators or flee from them. They captured them and bred them and turned them into companions." Sithara stared at the image in disbelief. "They keep predators as pets?" "Not just predators. They have domesticated creatures that could kill them with a single strike. They ride animals that weigh 10 times as much as they do. They have bent their entire world to their will through sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat." The screen changed to show human soldiers in various combat situations throughout history. "High Commander, we made a fundamental error in our assumptions. We believed that humans were prey animals who had accidentally developed intelligence and technology. We thought that if we showed them superior force, their prey instincts would cause them to submit. Veltris turned to face Sithara directly. But humans are not prey. They are apex predators. They sit at the top of their food chain. Nothing on Earth hunts them. They are the most successful predator their planet has ever produced. And they achieve that status by being more aggressive and more adaptable than everything else. The truth hit Sithara like a plasma bolt to the chest. All this time, she had been treating the humans like frightened animals who needed to be herded. But they were not frightened animals. They were hunters. And the Valkyrie had invaded their territory. The reason they fight so hard is not because they are brave or stupid, Veltris continued. It is because fighting back is literally in their genetic code. For millions of years, any human who ran from a threat died. Only those who stood and fought survived. We cannot scare them into submission because fear triggers their aggression, not their compliance. Sithara sank into her chair as the full horror of their situation became clear. They had not invaded a planet of cattle waiting to be harvested. They had kicked open the den of the most dangerous predators in the galaxy and then acted surprised when those predators fought back. Is there any way to defeat them? Sithara asked, though she already suspected the answer. Veltris shook her head slowly. Not through force. The more we hurt them, the harder they will fight. The more we kill, the more determined the survivors will become. They have a saying that I found in their literature. What does not kill me makes me stronger. The words echoed in Sithara's mind as she looked out the viewport at the blue world below. She had come to Earth believing she would claim it for the Valkyrie Dominion. Now she understood that Earth had already been claimed by something far more terrifying than anything the galaxy had ever seen. And those apex predators were looking up at the stars with hungry eyes. 1 year after the invasion began, the unthinkable happened. The Valkyrie Dominion, conquerors of 47 species across 6 spiral arms, requested a ceasefire with the primitive beings of Earth. High Commander Sithara stood on the bridge of her flagship, now scarred and damaged from a year of brutal warfare. She had entered Earth's orbit with 300 warships and supreme confidence. She would leave with only 41 ships and the bitter taste of defeat on her tongue. But it was not the military losses that broke the Valkyrie will to fight. It was not the 60,000 dead soldiers or the 12 destroyed warships. It was something far more terrifying that forced Sithara to contact the Dominion High Council and admit failure. It was the intercepted human transmissions. Play the recording again, Sithara commanded her communications officer. The tired Valkyrie nodded and activated the playback. The voices of human military commanders filled the bridge, translated into the Valkyrie language by automated systems. They were not discussing surrender or retreat. They were not negotiating terms of peace. They were planning something that made every Valkyrie on the bridge tremble with genuine terror. We have successfully reverse-engineered their faster-than-light drive systems. The first human starship will be ready for testing within 6 months. Excellent. And the weapon systems? We have improved upon their plasma technology. Our versions are 20% more powerful and 30% more efficient. We also have 300 nuclear warheads ready for space deployment. Good. Begin drafting invasion plans for their home systems. We will not wait for them to return. We will bring the war to their worlds. Sithara stopped the recording and looked at her officers. Their faces were pale, their bioluminescent skin dim with fear. For the first time in their long history, the Valkyrie were not the hunters. They were the prey. They are not content to merely survive, Commander Kethril said quietly. They are planning to pursue us across the stars. They want revenge. And that was when Sithara understood the true nature of the mistake the Valkyrie had made. They had awakened something that should have been left sleeping. They had poked a creature that did not know how to forgive and did not know how to forget. Humans did not just want to win the war. They wanted to make sure that no one would ever threaten Earth again. And they were willing to chase the Valkyrie across the entire galaxy to accomplish that goal. The peace negotiations were brief and completely one-sided. Human representatives sat across from Valkyrie, diplomats in a bombed-out building that had once been the United Nations headquarters. The humans made their demands clear with cold voices and colder eyes. Earth would be recognized as sovereign territory, free from all Valkyrie claims forever. The Valkyrie fleet would withdraw to a minimum distance of 500 light-years and never approach Sol System again. All captured humans would be returned immediately, and all Valkyrie technology left on Earth would be forfeited as war reparations. And there was one final demand that the humans insisted upon above all others. The Valkyrie would broadcast a warning to every known civilization in the galaxy. They would tell the universe what they had found on Earth and what had happened to those who tried to conquer it. Sithara agreed to everything. She had no choice. The alternative was watching her remaining fleet destroyed by a species that had proven itself capable of impossible things. The warning message was transmitted across every frequency the Valkyrie used. It spread through subspace relays and communication networks until it reached the farthest corners of the galaxy. Every civilization capable of receiving radio signals heard the same words, translated into their own languages by universal translators. This is a priority warning from the Valkyrie Dominion to all spacefaring civilizations. The star system designated Sol, third planet from its sun, is hereby classified as permanently interdicted. The native species, known as humans, are to be considered extremely hostile and dangerous beyond measure. Classification: Apex Predator. Under no circumstances should any vessel approach this system. Do not attempt contact. Do not attempt trade. Do not attempt colonization. The humans do not surrender. They do not negotiate from weakness. They do not forget those who wronged them. And they will follow you home. This warning is issued for the protection of all civilized species. Sol System is forbidden. The humans are not to be disturbed. The message ended with coordinates and star charts showing the location of Earth, marked with symbols that every species in the galaxy would recognize as meaning extreme danger. Years later, after Sithara had been stripped of her rank and exiled in disgrace, she was called before the Galactic Council to give testimony about the failed Earth invasion. Representatives from 100 species filled the Great Chamber, all of them curious about the mysterious humans who had defeated the mighty Valkyrie. A young delegate from a species that had never known war raised his hand and asked a question that Sithara had been dreading. Former High Commander, what was your greatest mistake? What would you do differently if you could go back? Sithara was silent for a long moment. Her crystalline eyes grew distant as memories of burning cities and dying soldiers flashed through her mind. When she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with the weight of everything she had witnessed. Our mistake was a failure of understanding. We looked at the humans and saw primitive creatures living on a small world. We saw technology that was crude compared to our own. We saw a species that had never traveled beyond their own moon, and we assumed that made them weak. She paused to look at the assembled delegates, beings who had never faced true war and never known real fear. But we were wrong. The humans are not weak. They are the product of a death world that tried to kill them every single day for millions of years. Everything about them, their aggression, their endurance, their refusal to surrender, these traits were forged in the fires of constant survival. They did not evolve to be peaceful. They evolved to win. The chamber was completely silent. We thought we were the predators and they were the prey. But we had it backwards. Humans are apex predators who learn to build starships. They are monsters who look like gentle beings. And now that they know we exist, now that they know there are other worlds to conquer, they will not stop. Sithara rose from her seat and looked at each delegate in turn. Mark my words. The humans will leave their solar system. They will spread across this galaxy like a wildfire. And nothing will stop them. Not because they are evil or cruel, but because that is simply what they are. They are survivors. And survivors do not stop until they have won. She walked toward the exit, then paused and turned back one final time. Pray that they see you as friends when they arrive. Because if they see you as enemies, your species will become nothing but a footnote in their history books. The doors closed behind her, leaving the Galactic Council in stunned silence. Far away, on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star, humanity looked up at the night sky. They saw the stars that had always seemed so distant and unreachable. But now they knew the truth. They were not alone in the universe. And the universe had tried to destroy them. A smile spread across the face of humanity. Not a kind smile or a gentle smile, but the smile of a predator that had just discovered new hunting grounds. The stars were waiting, and humanity was coming, ready to show the galaxy exactly why you should never tangle with humans.